What is going on, everybody? How we doing today? As usual, hope you're doing well. Today is a Thursday, actually. I almost said Wednesday. We did not stream Wednesday, and that's because I wanted to stream tonight because it is a special occasion, at least a special occasion in American history. That is the anniversary, I believe it was the 163rd anniversary of the first day of the Battle of Fredericksburg. I have become, I won't call myself a Civil War buff because the thing is, I really don't know I don't know nearly enough about anything to call myself a buff per se, but I have become interested in the Civil War due to familial ties that I never knew that I had, that I only learned about 2 or 3 years ago. Excuse me, but today we're going to be talking about the Battle of Fredericksburg, but more specifically, the first day of the Battle of Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg was a multi-day affair. It was 3 or 4 days long. It was not constant fighting throughout the whole thing, but there were flashpoints, one of which was the first day. And then 2 days later, December 13th, it is December 11th today, would be what is really the most well-known aspect of the Battle of Fredericksburg, which is the charge upon Marie's Heights. That's where the Irish Brigade really won a lot of its fame in the eyes of the average person, the mainstream. That kind of became household names, I guess you could say, after that because of their charge on Marie's Heights. It was unsuccessful, but just the way that they did it, the way they went about it was gallant. And speaking of gallantry, we're going to be talking about a couple of different groups of people and a couple of different individuals today. Now, I tried my best. I tried my best to make sure that I was going to be a little bit regimented, no pun intended, in the way that I go about this. But I apologize if I do kind of jump around or if I am a little bit, just a little bit, what was I gonna say? I apologize if I am just like a little bit, yes, okay, a little bit un, um, not unorganized, but disorganized. I apologize if I am. Um, I am pretty happy. Excuse me. I'm pretty happy with what I have right now. We are going to be looking through pretty much everything that I have here. And what's really cool is that I have a couple of, oh, and I actually almost forgot one of the things I was supposed to pull up. I actually have firsthand accounts of multiple different regiments who were there that day. This is the 13th Mississippi. They were one of the Mississippi regiments that would end up fighting in Fredericksburg that day. I also have the 19th Massachusetts and the 20th Massachusetts. My ancestor, who was at Fredericksburg, was a part of the 20th Massachusetts. They were known as the Harvard Regiment. We're gonna talk a little bit more about them as time goes on. A little under a year ago at this point, I actually went down to Maryland to visit, and since I was only a couple hours away from Fredericksburg, I figured I better take the chance. I figured I better take the chance to go out there and just see the battlefield, and I'm really happy that I got to do that. It was very rewarding for me, and one of the things that I brought back, really the only thing I brought back specifically from Fredericksburg that pertains to the battle, was this. It's actually water from the Rappahannock River. I'm going to show you something right here from Kittle, which I would assume is like Wikipedia for kids, I would guess. But this is the upper pontoon crossing of the Battle of Fredericksburg. There were three pontoon sites or three river crossings that day. This is the upper one, and this is the most well known of all of the pontoon crossings. But I'm gonna try my best to talk about it from the beginning, right? So that we can kind of do our thing. And this isn't like I do these presentation streams sometimes. I do these book report streams sometimes, and it's not like it has to be anything crazy. I don't have to just be like constantly just like bang 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 like on to the next thing. I will be talking to everybody and stuff like that about stuff that goes on. And speaking of which, I might as well say hello to everyone. Hello, hello, Laksu Monsu. Hello, FVD. Uh, hello, I almost said hello to myself. What's going on, Zach? What's going on, Isho Boy? What's going on, Smart Moron? How we all doing today? Hope we're doing well. Scott was actually in the Civil War, guys. Don't even play with him. You're right. You're right. I was a drummer boy in the Civil War, man. But yeah, like it's been really rewarding learning about my family history, and it's been really rewarding learning about the Civil War and things that have gone down in it and stuff like that. History that my ancestor was a part of. As somebody who really loves history, I love to know facts about stuff. I'm a big facts guy. I like you want to hear 101 wild and wacky facts about Harry Potter? I'm a facts guy, kind of, sort of. Um, and knowing that like I had ancestors who were a part of that is pretty crazy to me, or just an ancestor. I also had an ancestor in World War II, as many people did. It's not like I'm the only person with ancestry to the Civil War and World War II, but my grandfather, I never got to meet him. He died like a little under 10 years before I was born, but um he was in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, which was the last ship to ship naval battle in history since then. We're getting closer to 100 years. Every year we get 1 year closer to 100 years since then. But jokes aside, like that's cool. It's not only the last, but it is also the biggest naval battle in history. You know, um, I'm pretty sure it was anyway. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, we're not talking about Leyte Gulf. We're talking about Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg, damn it. I think it's important that you understand your family history though. Both for yourself and people who come after you. I think it's important to know what they fought for or what they lived for and what they lived through in order for you to be here today. That ancestor of mine that was in the Civil War, he was born a year before the potato famine in Ireland. And he and I actually figured out his family, like his mom and his dad, probably came here too, if not at the very least his mom. Um, they came here to escape the famine. I think the famine actually stunted his growth because he was only 5'3" as an adult, which is insane. My wife, I think my wife might be like 5'4". He was shorter than my wife. Um, but what was I gonna say? Yeah, like he survived the potato famine. He comes here at a time where the Irish were not loved completely and totally. He built a life for himself in addition to fighting for the nation to become an American. Um, and that's something that I take very seriously. That's something I think is incredibly important because um, you you're there's this saying from a lot of people. There's this saying like, "Oh, you are the fuck." I forget what people used to say, but like the bottom line is like I'm not gonna let that go to waste. I'm not gonna let the Leyte Gulf go to waste. I'm not gonna let anything else like that go to waste. I've like how could I? How could I be such a fucking asshole to do that? I have to live the best life that I can in order to not allow my ancestor being wounded in this battle. That's part of the reason why it's so important to me is because he got shot in this battle, and I'm sure he was never the same again. Because he stayed in a hospital for a year before they transferred him to the Veterans Reserve Corps, which was basically the cripple corps. Like if you were missing an arm or a leg or something like that, but you could at least like stand at a building and guard it. That's where you were sent. And he spent the rest of the war in Alexandria, Virginia, which was occupied by the Federals. He was probably like a guard or like some kind of runner or something like that in Alexandria, Virginia. They called it the Department of Alexandria at that point. This isn't supposed to be about my family member in particular, but I'm just explaining to you why this battle is so important to me. Um, I couldn't like how dare I allow that to go to waste and not live the best life that I can and be the best guy that I can be after something like that happened, you know? Um but yeah, can you do an Irish accent? Yeah, I could do one. I feel now you're asking me to do one though, and it's making me shy. It's like if you asked me to sing, I'd be like, no, no, you know. Um, it's funny too. It's crazy how small and funny the world is because I actually found somebody that I'm distantly related to, who also had an ancestor that I would not be related to in the same regiment. Um, I am related to the people who set up the Rochester and Dover, New Hampshire areas. The family, one of the families that set them up, I don't think they're Mayflower. Nah, they're not Mayflower. But they are like very early, like heritage Americans. Their last name is Dame. Um, I found somebody, I believe his name was Robert Dame, who had an ancestor, like a great grandfather, who was in the 20th Massachusetts. His name was Anton Steffens. And I made contact with this guy, and I was actually able to confirm, like, oh no, like we tra- we trace our shit back, and we find the same guy at the end of it. Oh fuck, you know, that's funny. Small world. But yeah, Scott Lordrop, of course. Boo, Patriots suck. Patriots rule. Fuck you. Anyway, uh, I love learning about this stuff. It's fucking great. Yeah, it is really fun. It is really fun, you know? Like don't get me wrong, I probably wouldn't be this into the Civil War if I didn't have a familial link that was like specifically one that shared my name, you know? Cuz his name was Michael Sullivan. I actually have a book somewhere. I forget where I put it. I I don't want to go like hunting for the book right now, but I have a book that's on the 20th Massachusetts that was that specifically mentions him because he talked shit. He was shit talking. Shit talking is the Sullivan men Sullivan men are in the history books for talking shit, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? Literally, it's like page 30 something. It's not even deep into the book. There's a book. It's Harvard Civil War by Richard F. Miller. He mentions my ancestor was put on prison fare for 24 hours, which is bread and water. That's all he had to eat, for 24 hours, which I don't know. That's kind of like are you was it really just 24 hours? Did they like I could do bread and water for 24 hours. Maybe it was like one small piece of bread and then just water and like or maybe they were like, this dude's fucking Irish. Let's just take his whiskey away. Let's just take his alcohol away and it'll be good. That's punishment enough for this fucking Mick. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know. But yeah, like basically he talked while on picket duty and like he got cussed out because of it and he didn't like that he got cussed out. So he started like talking shit to the commanding officer that cussed him out. And then that's when he got put on the prison fare. But anyway, um um yes, here. Oh wow. This is a long. I said I was a little bit I said I was a little bit organized. I was like, "Oh, I'm organized enough. I'm organized enough." And now I'm looking at an article and I'm like, oh man, I should like probably not read through this one because it is quite the long one. And then in addition to that, I wanted to start with a little bit. I wanted to start a little bit with yeah, you know what, fuck it. So I wanted to start with the background. Okay. Now, I hate that I'm going straight to Wikipedia here. I apologize that I'm going straight to Wikipedia here. Okay. However, we're going to go to Wikipedia because there's a lot of info here that can be shared. All right. And I know a lot of this just off rip. Um, I know a lot of this off rip, right? But I just want to make sure that I kind of have it right. So basically, what happened to start is there was the Battle of Antietam, which was in September of 1862. It was like August, September 1862. Now, the United States Army was not doing very well in the war. It was kind of a back and forth sort of thing, but the tactical and strategic victories were usually going to the the Confederates, right? A lot of the time when the Union would win, it was less that they won an overwhelming victory and more that like they accomplished the goal of getting out of wherever they were being chased out of or something like that. And that's like a good example of what the Battle of Savage's Station is. That's one of my favorite battles as well because again, my ancestor took part in it. But Savage's Station was a rearguard action between the Confederates and then the Union Second Corps, which was what the 7th Michigan, 19th Mass, and the 20th Massachusetts were all a part of, along with a ton of other regiments. Um, what happened there was they held off the Confederates from catching up with the rest of the Union Army to deal a decisive blow that could potentially end the war. That could be considered a win, I guess you could say, for the Federals, but really only because they didn't get completely fucked up. They were still running away. They just they successfully ran away is really what it was. But um, Antietam was an interesting little thing because what's his face? McClellan, the leader of the Army of the Potomac at the time, the general of the Army of the Potomac, he actually found Robert E. Lee. For some reason, the names are escaping me right now. I don't know why. He found Robert E. Lee's battle plans that were actually wrapped in cigars. Somebody got the idea to wrap the battle plans around cigars to try and hide them so that if you opened up the box, you'd be like, oh, it's cigars, whatever. You wouldn't realize that there was actually like battle plans written around them. Um, those battle plans got intercepted, and McClellan knew exactly what um, General Lee was going to do when he went to Sharpsburg, which is actually where the Battle of Antietam took place. It's there isn't like an Antietam in Maryland. It's Sharpsburg, Maryland, and oh excuse me, there's a creek nearby called Antietam Creek. Now Antietam was a bloodbath. It was the bloodiest day in Union history, right? When I say Union, I mean American history. Even bloodier by the numbers than anything in World War II, or Vietnam or any other war, right? It was to this day, when it comes to the amount of casualties, the worst day in American history, American military history. Um, and all that really happened was that there was an indecisive sort of, well, I think we won situation that came of that. Really, the Battle of Antietam was more like 3 or 4 separate battles that kind of happened like one after another in different areas of Sharpsburg. My ancestor was at the West Woods, which was a slaughter. They walked into a kill box, and it took them like 15 minutes to get out, and they were just like, I don't think we're going back in there. I think it's probably a bad idea. So that was Antietam for my ancestor, was just like getting caught in an ambush. Um, but when it comes to Antietam, that was not the win that President Lincoln wanted, even though it allowed him the ability to proclaim emancipation, to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. Right, that's when the Emancipation Proclamation occurred. Was after the Battle of Antietam. It was not the decisive battle that he felt he needed to win the war in and of itself, but it was enough of a decisive battle that he was able to kind of spin it in a propaganda way. And then he also made the war about slavery at that point. Up until that point, even Lincoln was like, it's strictly to preserve the Union. Damn it, that's all it's for. That's it. But after Antietam, he made it about slavery. So that's what people say that's what people mean when they say the war wasn't about slavery until Lincoln made it about that. Kind of true, kind of not true. There's a lot of different things, you know. Now, when the Battle of Antietam occurred and it was not the decisive victory Lincoln wanted, he didn't get rid of McClellan right away. There was some other shit that happened in between, you know, disrespectful things, and then certain actions that either were taken or were not taken that the opposite should have happened. But eventually, um, McClellan gets a letter saying that he is relieved of command of the Army of the Potomac. And the person who steps up is a man named General Burnside, Ambrose Burnside. In fact, here he is. And if you're wondering, yes, this is where we get the term sideburns. Because holy shit, look at this guy. Oh, he was a governor of Rhode Island 3 times. I didn't even know that. Fuck. Good for him. Good for him. You know that? But anyway, this is where we end up here, okay? And I wanted to kind of give that a little bit, right? Because it says further information: Peninsula Campaign, 7 Days Battles, Northern Virginia Campaign, Maryland Campaign, Eastern Theater, the blah, 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 right? The Maryland Campaign, and the Peninsular Campaign. I've heard people say peninsular and peninsula, you know? I don't even know, but anyway, how do you feel about using Wikipedia as a resource? Some people are against it, but the fact anyone can edit it also leads to a lot of scrutiny. I mean, have you ever tried to edit a Wikipedia article? It doesn't just show up right away. It has to be approved before it shows up. The days of Wikipedia being edited and your edits showing up like immediately they're way over. That just doesn't happen anymore, you know? We used to be in we used to be in I almost said math class, computer class, and we'd just pick random articles, and we'd pick a random paragraph, and we'd just start typing like booty 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 rocking everywhere, just fucking stupid shit like that, which we thought was the funniest thing at the time. Still is kind of, it would be funny still if it was like you're just reading and out of nowhere that shit happens, but um anyway, so we are here now, okay? It is November of 1862. U.S. President Abraham Lincoln needed to demonstrate the success of the Union war effort before the Northern public lost confidence in his administration. And right away, this is one of the things that I don't like about the North in the Civil War. And I know there's a lot of memes and jokes and stuff like that. It's so clear that Abraham Lincoln was just focused on getting reelected. When you take a look at what he did and how he did it, it's so clear. He's basically Steve Jobs, and all of his generals, especially McClellan, were Wozniaks. Essentially, if you know the dynamic between Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, you understand Steve Jobs is sitting in fucking board meetings just like, what I want is this, get it done. And Wozniak is the guy who actually has the know-how and the understanding to do things, you know? McClellan was not a perfect general by any means, but he, if we're being honest here, did not get the support that he really needed. You know, he was cautious, he was indecisive, he did a lot of things that he shouldn't have, and he didn't do a lot of things that he should have. But if there is one thing you can definitely say, it's that he was undersupplied and undersupported by everybody. And Abraham Lincoln, like I said, was just Steve Jobs about it. It was, come on, get it done. Go, go, go. Come on. He didn't care about whether or not McClellan actually had what he needed to make a real push. But I mean, that is what it is. That's kind of another thing. Confederate armies had been on the move earlier in the fall, invading Kentucky and Maryland. I didn't even know about Kentucky. Interesting. And by the way, the reason they invaded Kentucky and Maryland, it's not just a landmass thing. It's not just a geography thing. Excuse me. It's not just that they were close by. It's that Maryland and Kentucky were both slave-holding states that stayed loyal to the Union, and what they were hoping for was that an invasion of these two areas would lead to the slave-owning populace and just any other people who are supportive, well, supportive was an all right word. There's another word I wanted to think of that I wanted to use that I just can't think of right now. Basically, anyone who was supportive of the Southern cause in any way, shape, or form might be willing to rise up and switch sides. That did not happen. A good example of this was the Baltimore riots in Maryland, which um, basically in the early days of the war, there were Union soldiers who were marching through Baltimore. And I actually got to go to this part of Baltimore. They have some exhibits set up outside. And they got attacked by rioters who were sympathetic. Sympathetic is a word. Sympathetic to the Southern cause. But anyway, although each had been turned back, those armies remained intact and capable of further action. Lincoln urged Major General Ulysses S. Grant to advance against the Confederate stronghold of Vicksburg, Mississippi. He replaced Major General Don Carlos Buell with Major General William S. Rosecrans, hoping for a more aggressive posture against the Confederates in Tennessee. And on November 5th, seeing that his replacement of Buell had not stimulated Major General George B. McClellan into action, Lincoln issued orders to replace McClellan in command of the Army of the Potomac. McClellan had stopped General Robert E. Lee's forces at the Battle of Antietam in Maryland, but had not been able to destroy Lee's army, nor did he pursue Lee back into Virginia aggressively enough for Lincoln. Basically what I explained earlier. McClellan's replacement was Major General Ambrose Burnside, the commander of the Ninth Corps. Burnside, had established a reputation as an independent commander with successful operations earlier that year in coastal North Carolina, and unlike McClellan, had no apparent political ambitions. That is one thing, actually. General McClellan, he ran for president against Lincoln, which is insane. That's crazy. But however, he felt unqualified for Army-level command and objected when first offered the position. He accepted only when it was made clear to him that McClellan would be replaced in any event and that a choice for command was Major General Joseph Hooker, whom Burnside disliked and distrusted. Hooker was actually a Fighting Joe Hooker was from Massachusetts. But anyway, whom Burnside disliked and distrusted. Burnside assumed command on November 7th. So, now, I just wanted to make sure, right? Because, like I said, uh, anyway, so Burnside's plan. In response to prodding from Lincoln and Major General Henry W. Halleck, Burnside planned a late fall offensive. He communicated his plan to Halleck on November 9th. The plan relied on quick movement and deception. He would concentrate his army in a visible fashion near Warrenton, feigning a movement on Culpeper Courthouse, Orange Courthouse, or Gordonsville. He would then rapidly shift his army southeast and cross the Rappahannock River to Fredericksburg, hoping that Lee would not move, unclear as to Burnside's intentions. At the same time, the Union Army made a rapid movement against Richmond, south along the Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac Railroad. From Fredericksburg, Burnside selected this plan because he was concerned that if he were to move directly south from Warrenton, he would be exposed to a flanking attack from Lieutenant General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson, whose corps was at the time in the Shenandoah Valley south of Winchester. He also believed that the Orange and Alexandria Railroad, O&A, Opie and Anthony, uh, would need an adequate supply line. Burnside was also influenced by plans McClellan began developing just before being relieved. Aware that Lee had blocked the O&A, McClellan considered a route through Fredericksburg and ordered a small group of cavalrymen commanded by Captain Ulrich Dahlgren to investigate the condition of the RF&P. While Burnside began assembling a supply base at Falmouth near Fredericksburg, the Lincoln administration undertook a lengthy debate about the wisdom of his plan, which differed from the president's preference of a movement south on the O&A and a direct confrontation with Lee's army instead of the movement focused on the city of Richmond. Lincoln reluctantly approved the plan on November 14th, but cautioned his general to move with great speed, certainly doubting that Lee would react as Burnside anticipated. Now, the way this was going to work, right? We won't bother, because this is a lot of reading, and we have a lot of reading as is, right? We have a lot of reading as is. So I'll give you the cliff notes. Essentially, this debate and the bullshit in Washington, D.C. is the main reason why the battle would end up occurring the way that it did. For one thing, again, you notice how, like I said, the people in Washington were not really understanding the situation that was on the war front. They had their little cushy situation going for them in DC where they could talk about whatever they wanted to, and the people on the front lines who were actually doing the dying, they just had to deal with it, right? Now that's just war, right? That's just the way war is a lot of the time. You have people who will never experience it, like, say, Abraham Lincoln, who was not a Lincoln was never in the armed forces. He wasn't even considered to be like a particularly good tactician or anything like that. Um, that's just the story of war. There's always going to be some kind of just someone who's like, oh no, it should be done this way, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they aren't gonna deal with the consequences. Right now, um one of the hold on one sec. I'm gonna switch to something. Sorry, I'm trying to get situated for the next thing here. One of the results of all of that arguing and all of that bullshit in DC was that the supply lines did not send down all of the things that were going to be necessary for the river crossing, which specifically is referring to some pontoon bridges. Now, if you take a look at the bridge here, or not the bridge here, if you take a look at the map here, you will notice that there is the blue here and the red here. Okay, the blue is the Federals, the red is the Confederates. Now, when the Federals moved in, they encamped on this side of the river. You can see Stafford Heights here. That's where they encamped, and there was a house that was used as a field hospital as well as a headquarters for the brass. Now they had to get across this river, but the bridge that was created at whatever point in history was blown up. There were actually multiple bridges, I believe, that were blown up. But for sure, I know there was one bridge in this area that when Fredericksburg was, in the early days of the war, the bridge got destroyed by, I actually believe, the Union, but I could be wrong about who exactly destroyed it. Now, as a result, what they needed was something to cross the river. Now, these right here look like bridges, and yes, they are bridges, but they are completed pontoon bridges. The idea of a pontoon bridge is you have these boats, pontoons. They are large, flat boats that are essentially rowed into a line, and then wooden planks are placed over the bridges. And when you have that, you're able to cross, obviously. The problem is there aren't just pontoons laying around everywhere. So, in order to build pontoon bridges, the engineers of the 50th New York who would try to build these bridges, they needed those supplies from DC. And what happened was the Army of the Potomac got here and they had to sit here waiting for the pontoon bridges. They had to just sit there waiting for them to arrive from Washington, D.C., which when I drove from Baltimore to Fredericksburg, that was about a 2 hour drive. Baltimore is, I want to say, 45 or so minutes north of Washington, D.C. So that's probably about an hour and 15 minutes if you have a modern highway system. I can only imagine how long that would take to transport all of that by fucking cart, by horse-drawn wagon. That must be insanely long. These guys, they left for Fredericksburg on November 15th, 1862. Actually, my birthday, just only a few years earlier. Only a few years earlier, November 15th. And they had to wait until December to actually go through with the plan. So almost an entire it almost took them an entire month to get there and set everything up to actually cross. Now, this presents a problem, right? Now, Fredericksburg at this time was considered to be what they called a completed city. And what that means is there was really no reason or need to add more to it. Excuse me. They just kind of were they were just there. They were just Fredericksburg. They weren't adding more industry. They weren't building more ports or just anything. It was just kind of what it was. Like what you see here, this was pretty much just Fredericksburg. That's it. This is not even the size of my hometown, right? Um, Fredericksburg was an interesting thing because there were not really many people there. And when I say many people, I don't just mean many civilians. I mean, there were plenty of civilians there. But when I say many people, what I really mean is there was not much of a military presence there. They had a home guard, basically people who would stand around with rifles and they'd sound the alarm if they saw anything weird. Honestly, just a martial law police force, like military police is essentially what they had. Um, Now, when the Army of the Potomac rolled up, obviously that caused quite a bit of alarm. People started evacuating Fredericksburg, and the guard that was there, they started shooting at the Army of the Potomac. Now, the Army of the Potomac, obviously the much bigger force, they didn't destroy the fucking city, but it was kind of understood real quick that the Army of the Potomac at this point in time, if they were able to cross, they would have absolutely murdered anybody with a musket who raised it in anger, you know? So what happened is there was actually a promise made to the Army of the Potomac by the mayor of Fredericksburg that they would not be fired upon any more than they already were. And in addition to that, that the Confederate Army, the Army of Northern Virginia, would not use Fredericksburg for any military purpose. So that made it a little bit weird on December 11th when these guys, the 50th New York Engineers, start building the pontoon bridges, and then shots ring out. Dudes start falling and they have to run away from the pontoon bridges they're creating. This obviously made it a little awkward, made it a little weird, and made it really difficult to deal with because these were sharpshooters from Mississippi and Florida. I'm not saying that as though like they are like the top shots in the army or anything like that. But what I'm saying is, the Army of Northern Virginia lied. The mayor of Fredericksburg lied. These people were essentially guaranteed, meaning the Army of the Potomac, safe passage across the river, and in return, they would just not destroy the town and kill anybody who was considered to be like a Confederate, a Confederate soldier. Um, what ended up happening was at first, they figured maybe an artillery bombardment would fix the issue, but that did not do what they wanted to. They would bombard the town, and they absolutely shredded the town to bits. They absolutely, positively, they 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 fucking killed it. They absolutely murdered that shit, right? Um, and the thing is, the Mississippians and the Floridians, they would just duck into alleyways or into buildings or into, say, like cellars and things like that. They would duck into cellars and they would be mostly safe, but not completely safe. They did take some casualties there. Eventually, it became clear after multiple rounds of shelling and the engineers still getting driven back every time the shelling stopped and they went out to try and repair the pontoons, or not repair, but prepare them. It became clear that that was not working and that it was not going to work. So they needed a new plan, and that was to cross the river. And this is where we get to the 7th Michigan. Okay. Um, like I said, I'm really upset. I'm gonna say this right away. I'm uh I'm kind of upset. I'm kind of upset. You know this right here. That was the I would have loved to have that book, but I don't know if you noticed it was $120. That book was $120 for that book. I was so excited when I saw that. I was so excited when I saw it, and then it was just like, oh, all right, okay, well, but anyway, um, sorry, I'm looking for the, I'm looking for more, um, yes, okay, so the 7th Michigan. Okay, I got to be honest with you. I don't know too much about the 7th Michigan in and of itself. Okay, however, I do know that it was commanded by Colonel Hall, who would end up commanding the entire brigade by the time Fredericksburg came around. What happened was there was a brigade commander of the brigade that the 7th Michigan, the 19th and the 20th Massachusetts, and the 42nd New York as well. Um, there was a commander. His name was Napoleon J.T. Dana. That is Napoleon Jackson Tecumseh Dana. That is an insane name. He would be wounded at Antietam, and as a result, Colonel Hall, excuse me, Norman J. Hall would take over, and he would command his own regiment to cross the Rappahannock in boats. We're gonna read a little bit about that now. Yeah, $120 is fucking insane, Mr. James. Um, Early in the morning of December 11th, 1862, the 7th Michigan Infantry Regiment, or their commanders volunteered to jump into the pontoon boats and row themselves across the Rappahannock River to Fredericksburg, Virginia, while under fire. Waiting for them on the Fredericksburg side was William Barksdale's Mississippi Brigade, which had barricaded themselves in structures and in rifle pits along the banks of the river. Um, it says that the 7th Michigan volunteered or their commanders volunteered them. Only about 60 or 70 of what would have been several hundred troops were able to were able to cross the river into Fredericksburg. There's no way these guys were not volunteers. I'm sure there were maybe some guys who felt like, oh, well, I have to go because, my company's going, or, my best friend's going and I got to watch his back, or, oh, I don't want to be seen as a coward, right? I'm sure there was a little bit of that going around, but only about 60 or 70 of the 7th Michigan, these Wolverines, as a lot of them would be called, um, only that many guys were really able to travel in these pontoon boats to get to the other side of the Rappahannock. Anyway, excuse me. A man standing nearby reportedly overheard Burnside saying something to brigade commander and former 7th Michigan Regimental Commander Colonel Norman J. Hall that the effort meant death to most of those who should undertake the voyage. The commanding general then added, if any should cross under the conditions, it would be one of the greatest feats of war. The 7th Michigan quickly rowed across the river and established a bridgehead for a significant portion of the Army of the Potomac to make their way across. For this action, the 7th Michigan was nicknamed the Forlorn Hope Regiment. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Baxter, who was severely wounded in the left shoulder in this assault at Fredericksburg, his third wound of the war, would be a brigadier general at Gettysburg. His brigade surprised Iverson's North Carolina Brigade on July 1st, 1863, on Oak Ridge. Baxter would be wounded a fourth time at the Wilderness in May 1864. And here is a painting. I don't know how recent this painting is, but this is a painting of the river crossing right here. At Fredericksburg on December 11th, 1862, the Union engineers were to lay pontoon bridges across the river. Barksdale's Mississippians began to pick them off, and according to one Union officer, the engineer troops failing to perform their part, running away from the boats at the first fire from the enemy and seeking shelter. In actuality, 50 of the engineers had been killed or wounded. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Baxter, at Gettysburg, a brigadier general in Robinson's division of the 1st Corps, volunteered his 7th Michigan to row across the Rappahannock to establish a bridgehead. And then there was another example as well. At Fredericksburg, the first group of the 7th Michigan, consisting of approximately 65 men, pushed across so rapidly that only one man was killed. The Lieutenant Colonel Baxter and several more were wounded. And then there was one more right here. This is them actually getting off the boats. The bridgehead at Fredericksburg was established, the pontoon bridge completed, and other Union units began to cross and clear the streets of the city. The 7th Michigan attacked the well-entrenched Confederate positions at Marie's Heights on December 13th. That's 2 days from now. That's what I was talking about. What people know the Battle of Fredericksburg for. Total casualties for the 7th Michigan at Fredericksburg were 7. Wow, only 7 killed and 24 wounded. That's insane. That's crazy considering what they did. Now, what makes this so crazy beyond just what they were doing in general is the fact that this was the first amphibious crossing of a river or landing on any kind of beachhead under fire in American history, American military history. Something like this had never been done before in American military history, and I would assume it's probably not that common in military history in general at this point. Um, obviously, if you were invading a nation, you might have to land troops on a beachhead, but I feel like something like this was probably not that common. I feel like there was probably some level of, okay, we've bombarded the fuck out of their countryside. Now let's send our troops in, and they'll kind of they'll just row up to the beachhead and like set up camp, and then we can get logistics set up, and we'll figure out what the next move from there is. This is a really historically significant thing, and that's part of the reason why it's so crazy to me. And that's why like I have a reverence for this battle in particular. And speaking of which, I just remembered I actually have to grab something else because there's something that I would like to show you guys. Um yes, here it is. So we're not exactly skipping, but we are going to something that I'm going to show you guys. Sorry, I'm just looking for something here. Oh, okay. My phone's dying. There we go. I'm looking for something that has to do with the 7th Michigan, you know. Um um yes, okay, perfect. This is what I was looking for. So, I want like I want to see if there's anything having to do with with this in like any kind of book regarding the 7th Michigan, but I think this is a really cool story. There was an incident connected with the crossing of the 7th Michigan which has been told before but cannot be repeated too often. Robert H. Henderson, 12 years of age that day, a drummer boy of the regiment, desiring to make his birthday memorable, jumped into one of the boats when he was ordered out by the captain. Still desiring to do something of service, he got permission to push one of the boats off from shore, and as it slid into the stream, he clung to the stern and was dragged through the water to the other side. Running up the bank with the men, his drum was broken by a piece of shell. Thereupon he discarded it and, as useless, picked up a musket dropped by one who had been killed and fought in the ranks the remainder of the day. Now, this is especially insane because this was not like when we think of urban combat, which this was urban combat. When we think of urban combat, we tend to think of like slick, cool, like um, we tend to think of like we think of Call of Duty a lot of the time is what we think of. We think of like like slicing the pie, breaching and clearing a door using some kind of fucking method. We think of like slick tactical shooting and stuff like that. It was every bit as, I guess, gruesome would be a word. It was every bit as brutal, as fast paced, as perilous as modern urban conflict would be, except you only had one shot in your musket. So you would shoot that thing, and hopefully you got the guy in front of you. Whether you did or didn't, if he was not down, you had no choice but to immediately engage in hand to hand combat. Whether it was that guy or if it was you shot that guy, he's down, and now he's got friends in the room with him. You have to, one, hope that you don't get shot, right? But then two, you have to be willing to get down and dirty like that. And that's what the 7th Michigan did. They cleared enough of a beachhead that the 19th Massachusetts was able to go over. And uh One moment. Sorry, I have to go down to the this is where we get the 19th Massachusetts. I'm looking for that right now. Like I said, I apologize if I apologize blah blah. I apologize if I'm a little I'm apol I'm apologize. I apologize if I am just a little bit I apologize if I am a little bit disorganized. Okay. For one thing, I had a long day today. I really was thinking about doing it tomorrow or Saturday, but today is the anniversary of when all this stuff happened. So I knew, like, okay, I should really just try and fucking do it today. And I know that this isn't everybody's cup of tea listening to me speak about this specific thing. So thank you to the like 4 people that are here right now. I appreciate you guys. Anyway, so this is Reminiscences of the 19th Massachusetts Regiment by Captain John G.B. Adams. This is a guy who was actually a part of the 19th Massachusetts. Now, the 19th Massachusetts was formed in Western Mass, and they were attached to not the regiment, the brigade that the 20th and the 7th Michigan were also attached to. Now, when the 7th Michigan cleared enough of a beachhead, the 19th Massachusetts came as a backup as well as to try and push further into the town. And we're going to read a little bit of that, right? We continued the march through the valley to Warrenton, where General McClellan was relieved of the command of the army and General Burnside succeeded him. Nearly all the men were sad at the loss of McClellan. McClellan. He was our first love, and the men were loyal and devoted to him. I did not share in his sorrow. I did not share in this sorrow. My faith had become shaken when we retreated from before Richmond, and when he allowed Lee's army to get away from Antietam, I was disgusted and glad to see it change. Excuse me. Sad as the army felt at the loss of McClellan, they were loyal to the cause for which they enlisted and followed their new commander as faithfully as they had the old. We arrived at Falmouth about the middle of November, and we went into camp 2 miles from the town. Here we spent our second Thanksgiving. No dance for the officers this year. We had a dinner of hardtack and salt pork, and should have passed a miserable day, had not the commissary arrived with a supply of Poland water, and the officers were given a canteen of each. I wonder, Poland water is interesting because, like, there's a Poland spring in Maine. I wonder if that's where that water is from. If it's fucking Poland spring water, because that's also a brand of water that we grow up on around here, Poland spring water. But anyway, the men had the pleasure of hearing our sweet voices and songs of praise from the home of the fallen, as our tent was called. We remained undisturbed until the morning of December 11th, when we were ordered out to the banks of the Rappahannock River opposite Fredericksburg. Here we found a pontoon bridge partially laid and the engineers doing their best to complete it. Our batteries were posted on the hills in rear of our line, and were vigorously shelling the city, but the rebel sharpshooters were posted in cellars and rifle pits on the other side, and would pick off the engineers as fast as they showed themselves at work. At last the volunteers were called for by Colonel Hall, commanding the brigade, and the 19th Massachusetts and 7th Michigan volunteered. And one thing about this too is, like, Hall actually hesitated. He was like, "Yeah, I'll send my guys." "Hey guys, you're gonna go." Well, actually, I'm not sure if we should. And the 19th Mass and the 7th Michigan gave 3 cheers. They did the hip hip hooray thing to be like, "No, it's cool. We're willing to go." We took the pontoon boats from the wagons, carried them to the river, and as soon as they touched the water, filled them with men. 2 or 3 boats started at the same time, and the sharpshooters opened a terrible fire. Men fell in the water and in the boats. Lieutenant Colonel Baxter of the 7th Michigan was shot when halfway across. Henry E. Palmer of Company C was shot in the foot as he was stepping into the boat, yet we pressed on, and at last landed on the other side. As soon as the boats touched the shore, we formed by companies and, without waiting for regimental formation, charged up the street. On reaching the main street, we found that the fire came from houses in front and rear. Company B lost 10 men out of 30 in less than 5 minutes. Wow. Dude, damn. That's 1/3. Other companies suffered nearly the same. We were forced to fall back to the river, deploy as skirmishers, and reached the main street through the yards and houses. As we fell back, we left our men wounded in the street. His name was Redding of Company D, and when we again reached the street, we found him dead, the rebels having bayoneted him in 7 places. This is, it's not, it ain't a game. This is why I'm so proud of like my ancestor, and this is why like sometimes I'm holding it together now, but like when I hear these stories, it brings a tear to my eye because this is what was happening. This is the kind of thing these guys went through, and they pushed through it. You know, this is a certain this is an intensity and a struggle that even modern warfare would not be able to recreate. Like, yeah, industrial warfare has brought us man-made uh, horrors beyond comprehension. Yes, you're right, 100%, especially lately with these drones and shit like that, all these videos that we're seeing from Eastern Europe. It's terrible. It's awful, but there was a certain grime, there was a certain grit, there was a certain, in some cases, even cruelty. There was a tenderness, but even a cruelty at times, where you see that in the Civil War, and you're just like, whew, wow, ugh, damn. But the regiment was commanded by Captain H.G.O. Weymouth, Colonel Devereaux being very sick in camp. Captain Weymouth went from right to left of the line, giving instructions and urging the men forward. My squad was composed of men from companies I and A. We had reached a gate and were doing our best, I almost said war best, our best to cross the street. I had lost 3 men when Captain Weymouth came up. "Can't you go forward, Lieutenant Adams?" he said. My reply was, "It is mighty hot, Captain." He said, "I guess you can." Yeah, I would assume that's like a, "I guess you can." I would assume that's what it is. And started to go through the gate when as much as a barrel of bullets came at him. He turned and said, It is quite warm, Lieutenant. Go up through the house." We then entered the back door and passed upstairs to the front. Gilman Nichols of Company A was in advance. He found the door locked and burst it open with the butt of his musket. The moment it opened, he fell dead, shot from a house on the other side of the street. Several others were wounded, but he held the house until dark, firing at a head whenever he saw one on the other side. As night came on, we advanced across the street, and the rebels retired. We posted our pickets and went into the houses for rest and observation. The house my company now owned was formerly occupied by a namesake of mine, a music teacher. I left the men downstairs while I retired. The room I selected was the chamber belonging to a young lady. Her garments were in the press, and the little finery she possessed was scattered about the room. Fearing she might return, I did not undress, but went to bed with my boots on. I was soon lost in peaceful slumber when a sergeant came and said I was wanted below. Going to the kitchen, I found the boys had a banquet spread for me. There was roast duck, biscuits, all kinds of preserves spread upon the table, set with the best china. We were company, and the best was not, and the best was none too good for us. Excuse me. After supper, we went upstairs, and the men were assigned or assigned themselves to rooms. Um, so that sounds like it's the end of the river crossing, right? Now, one of the interesting things that I forgot to mention about the river crossing, right, was that people, when the Army of the Potomac first showed up, they evacuated Fredericksburg, but so much time passed without any fight or anything like that, that people actually started to return to Fredericksburg. They actually started to return and live in Fredericksburg, even though the Army of the Potomac was right across the river. They could peek out their windows, depending on where they were at, and see the giant mass of blue uniforms. And that made it especially crazy because now, when the battle started, there's people who are evacuating the city. Something else that happened was that there was a sack of the city. And this is one of those things, right? People talk about the sack of Fredericksburg. And I got to be honest with you, I don't really feel like, I'm not saying it's a good thing to like pillage and things like that. But also, you got to understand, in the situation with Fredericksburg, they were promised that they would not use the city for any kind of military anything. And in return, the Army of the Potomac would move in, they would occupy the city, and they would move on from it, and they would leave it intact. Well, the Army of Northern Virginia, led by Robert E. Lee, decided they were going to use the thing. They were gonna use the city. All right, and yeah, I mean, shit. We had a deal. Deal's off. You said my family name earlier. That's cool. That's pretty. That's pretty cool. Blitz. That's pretty cool. Blitz comment. It's always fun seeing your name, seeing your family name in something like that. Your ears perk up a little bit. But that was the endeavor of the 19th Massachusetts. Now I want to switch sides here for a second. All right. Oh, geez. What? Oh, damn. Um. Hmm. Sorry, I'm trying to find where I was the I'm trying to find where I was the other day. It's a little bit weird too, right? Because I was looking at this on my phone the other day, and it was a little bit different here. But this right here, like I said, I want to switch sides. I want to go to the other side here, and um I want to show a firsthand account of the people who are on the Confederate side talking about this, or not talking. Well, yeah, it's a firsthand account they're talking about it, but I wanted to give a firsthand account of the Confederacy, right? This is the 13th Mississippi, okay? And it's going to be talking about the river crossing from the standpoint of the Mississippi Brigade. So the Union crosses to fight. The 13th and 18th regiments formed in the dark on Murray's Heights. Then they were rushed down to the city where Union engineers were attempting to throw 3 pontoon bridges across the river. They had the bridges halfway across the river by daylight, wrote Private Mike Hubert of the Minutemen of Atala. This is one of the fun things. It's a little fun. It's a little interesting. Um, you would have, and this is especially an early war thing with this is especially an early war thing. You would have companies that would essentially have their own mascots or their own brands, their own like team names, right? The way regiments formed was you had groups of people who were from the same county, and they would all mob up, and they would get attached to a regiment that had people from other counties, or maybe even more people from that same county, depending on who signed up when. And that company might give themselves a name. Like, for instance, the Minutemen of Atala. I don't know exactly which company this is in the 13th Mississippi, but it's just a fun little thing they did. When they were fired on by the 17th and 21st Mississippi regiments and driven back, Quartermaster Clerk Hill wrote in his diary that the enemy then opened fire with 146 guns, 100, holy shit, I didn't know it was that many, of heavy artillery from the opposite side of the river. The men of the 13th and 18th regiments ran to the town nearly all the way at the double quick, Henley recorded. As we neared the city, we were met by many females who had been roused from their slumbers by the picket firing and shelling, hurrying out of the town to seek asylums of safety beyond the reach. The 13th reached the market square as the clock struck 6 a.m., halted and loaded, Henley wrote. The enemy's batteries were bursting all over the city, the lurid blaze as they exploded, filling the street with a red, unearthly glaze, filled the soldiers with fearful foreboding. The 13th and 18th Mississippi regiments took up position at the upper end of Caroline Street. Henley continued. There, Hill wrote, they were so situated that they could not fire on the enemy, but had to take their fire all day. Several were killed, and a large number were wounded, mostly by bricks and splinters from the houses. Several times they shifted position from Caroline Street to Princess Anne Street as the 7th Michigan Volunteer Infantry crossed the river on pontoon boats and marched into the town. Meanwhile, Union engineers finished their construction of the pontoon bridges, allowing the rest of the 3rd Brigade of Sedgwick's division troops from Massachusetts, New York, and Pennsylvania to cross the river and enter the fight. After the enemy had crossed, Private Mike Hubert wrote, maybe it's Hubert, maybe it's Hubbard, I don't know. It's probably Hubbard. In his diary, our brigade fell back in town and gave them battle. The fight lasted from 3 p.m. until dark. Our men fought bravely and against largely superior odds. They killed many of the enemy while our loss was comparatively small. Our brigade fell back out of town and their place was filled by General Cobb's Georgia Brigade. Barksdale's brigade was the only troops engaged that day. And cutting it off there, right? I'm gonna keep going, but like just like putting a pin in it there. This is really another insane thing about the Battle of Fredericksburg is that specifically the street fighting. There was one brigade holding up an entire army essentially. Burnside actually saw this and he got angry and he sort of crashed out about it. He was like a group of sharpshooters have my entire army by the throat is along the lines of what he said. He was not happy about that at all. And like we talk about people like Stonewall Jackson and stuff like that. And yeah, like Stonewall Jackson, legendary figure. There was a lot of cool things with him in the Civil War, but we don't know about people like Barksdale and his Mississippians and what they were able to do to turn what was going to be probably a win for the Union if they had those pontoon bridges built at the time they needed to, into an overwhelming loss. Because what happened was they held the Union Army up for just enough time for, actually, I believe it was Stonewall Jackson's division, um, or corps, or I he was a corps commander. Duh, he was a corps commander. But um, Stonewall Jackson's men got there because Barksdale's Mississippians and the Florida Regiment, I believe it was the 8th Florida, I could be wrong though, they were there to hold them off, you know? Um, a lot of people don't get the credit they deserve, but oh, uh-oh. In a let our brigade fell back out of the town, and their place was filled by General Cobb's Georgia Brigade. Barksdale's brigade was the only troops engaged that day. In a letter home, according to Jess McLean, Winston Guards Private William Little Davis, oh boy, recalled, "We secured ourselves behind houses and at street crossings, and woe is be to the bluecoat who showed his face. We killed lots of them in backyards and outhouses. One Yankee regiment formed a pretty line and were advancing up a street a little before dark. Our boys who were laying on the ground on the next street quickly rose and poured a deadly volley in their midst, causing great confusion. The Yankee officer cried to his men to charge the rebels. Our boys, one and all, cried out, 'Come on.' It finally got so dark that we had to fire at the lights of the enemy's guns." And there's a good chance that he's talking about the 20th Massachusetts, which we're going to talk about in a little while. And I don't know if that'll be like the end, but that we'll be getting closer and closer to wrapping that piece up. Uh, the oh wait, 17th Regiment Private Moore recorded about 4:30 p.m. "We were forced to retire down the riverbank, but held the Yanks out of the city until 8 p.m. when we retired and left the city in the hands of the abolitionists. All agree that the bombardment has been the most terrific they were ever under. The city is badly riddled and partly burnt. Jess McLean found records showing 102 men of the 13th Regiment were killed, wounded, and missing in the urban, urban fighting." And this is where they get the nickname the Bloody 13th, which is interesting because during the Civil War, the 20th Massachusetts was called the Bloody 20th. So it's funny that these guys faced off against each other so much. Colonel Carter's report. On December 28th, Colonel James Carter, commanding the 13th Regiment at Fredericksburg, wrote the following report to General Barksdale of the regiment's fight on December 11th. General, in accordance with your order, I marched my regiment at about 5 o'clock in the morning of the 11th instant to the market house in Fredericksburg, when I was ordered by you to take position on Caroline Street, await Lieutenant Colonel Pfizer's orders, send his 17th Mississippi Regiment reinforcements whenever he called on me to do so, and should he be unable to hold his position, then in that event to withdraw my regiment to the market house. I accordingly took position on Caroline Street, immediately in rear of the position occupied by Lieutenant Colonel Pfizer, and opened communication with him, where I remained until about 4 p.m. under a very heavy and destructive fire from the batteries of the enemy on the opposite side of the river. Around 4 p.m., Lieutenant Colonel Pfizer asked me for 10 men to act as sharpshooters, which I promptly sent him. About 4 p.m., Lieutenant Colonel Pfizer sent to me for 2 companies, which I was proceeding with when I met him retiring with his command to the market house, being unable to hold his position longer. I immediately formed my regiment and withdrew it to the market house, when I was ordered by you to form in the next street toward the river and engage the enemy. But before I could do so, I ascertained that the enemy occupied the street on which I was ordered to form and was advancing. I immediately disposed of my regiment on the street which I then occupied, Princess Anne, so as to command as many streets running at right angles with the river as I possibly could, and engage the enemy at once, driving him toward the river, after a spirited engagement of 2 hours. Having fired the last gun at the retreating enemy, I was then ordered to withdraw my regiment from the town, which order I promptly obeyed. The enemy's loss after crossing the river in the engagement with my regiment is estimated to be over 200 killed and wounded. I refer you to the report already furnished you of the loss which we sustained. Captain Captain J.L. Clark. These aren't too crazy to read. These aren't too crazy to read. So we're gonna probably read at least one more, you know. Um, Captain J.L. Clark of the Spartan Band was killed by a solid shot early in the morning. He was a promising young officer. Captain Thomas W. Thurman of the Newton Rifles was dangerously wounded later in the day, fell in the hands of the enemy, and in all probability is dead. Lieutenant John M. Stovall of the Kemper Legion is missing and is supposed to be killed. I wish to call your attention to the gallant and meritorious conduct of Captain George Lavelle Donald of the Secessionists. That's their mascot is Secessionists, who had immediate command of several companies which did fine execution without sustaining serious loss. I wish to also make mention of the coolness, bravery, and soldier like conduct of both officers and enlisted men of my command. J.W. Carter, Colonel commanding 13th Mississippi Regiment. I want to see one thing here. Also, as well. Um, I gotta make sure there's something that I had. There was a you know what? I think I might actually have messed something up here. I'm gonna have to see what I can do. That's weird. Sorry, I have to grab something else. Yes, here. That'll do. And then, you know what? I also need there's two more things that I'm going to there's two more things that I'm gonna need. I just have to hit that real quick on yes, there we go. Okay, cool. Oh, there it is. Okay. Fucking perfect. We got one. We got two. So we have Barksdale Stand, glorious, insubordinate, or both. The U.S. Army Center of Military History has no doubt what happened on December 11th or what it meant at Fredericksburg. Brigadier General William Barksdale's Mississippians, firing from houses along the river, repeatedly stopped the bridge building. Artillery fire failed to dislodge these snipers. Eventually, Union volunteers crossed in boats and cleared the town. On the rebel side, the fabled stand of the pugnacious Mississippians, though ultimately futile, was seen as glorious. General Edward Porter Alexander remembered it that way for the Southern Historical Society in 1882. Groups of officers, Alexander recalled, and the refugee inhabitants gathered on hills to gaze, and many a word of praise was spoken of indomitable Barksdale, who still held his position in the very ferocious of his foe Denver, fuck that. French military term for concentrated artillery fire, literally hellfire. Ah, interesting. You couldn't have just said hellfire. And whose rifles were still heard piping up a tiny treble in defiance of the mighty roar and again driving back the bridge builders who, under cover of this fire, had attempted to renew their work. After more than an hour's continuance and an expenditure of many thousand rounds of artillery ammunition, the bombardment was slackened in despair, and matters came to a standstill so far as the town was concerned. The Confederates had suffered severe loss, but they still held their positions and had driven the bridge builders from their work in 9 separate efforts made to complete it. About 7 p.m., there being no longer any object in holding the town, General McLaws ordered the force in the town to be withdrawn to the Telegraph Road under Marie's Hill, a position which he had selected for another obstinate, I said it right, stand. General Barksdale expressed his belief that he could hold the town and begged permission to do so, but the order was reiterated. According to Jess McLean, Private Sil J. Quinn of the Winston Guards recalled that their gallantry elicited the highest compliments from General Lee, who expressed himself surprised that any brigade should have held the advance of the army a longer period than 6 hours. But there were dissenters. Robert Stiles of the Richmond Howitzers recounts his 1904 memoir, 4 Years Under Mares Robert. They were ready to fight anything from His Satanic Majesty down, but they were a very poor set indeed as to judging when not to fight or when to stop fighting. Pfizer must have had retiring orders and ought to have seen that the Federal batteries absolutely dominated our shore, and yet he sent word to General Barksdale that if he would just let the howitzers come down with a couple of their guns, he would drive those people back anyhow. And old Barksdale, who was every bit as bad as Pfizer, and a little worse, actually sent the order. It would have been a practical impossibility to get these two poor little guns anywhere near the river. No two fragments of guns or men would have held together 5 minutes after they appeared on the plain that stretched out from the foot of the hills to the river, and their intentions became known to the batteries of Stafford Heights. McLaws countermanded the order, and it is fair to say for General Barksdale that he himself withdrew his own order, but General McLaws had already acted. But Pfizer was not the only officer that could not get it into his head, even a little later, that the troops were to abandon the town and retire before the enemy, who had now gotten their pontoons down the head of their column, landed in the town. The 21st Mississippi was the last regiment to leave the city. The last detachment was under the command of Captain Lane Brandon. We're going to talk about this guy. He lost his head completely. He refused to retire. He was put under arrest, and his subaltern brought to the command out of town. So it now becomes perhaps understandable why the 13th's Lieutenant Colonel Carter, in his after-action report, written more than 2 weeks after the battle, remarked that his orders to retire were promptly obeyed, which would otherwise be an odd thing for an officer to write to his superior. So this guy, Lane Brandon, right? This is a very interesting thing. I was going to talk about the 20th Massachusetts and how they made their way through the streets of Fredericksburg. And we were talking about the Mississippi Brigade, specifically the 13th Mississippi, but we're going to be moving on to something about the 21st Mississippi. It's very crazy because the Mississippi Brigade and the brigade that contained the Massachusetts regiments as well as the 7th Michigan, they would fight on multiple occasions, and they would absolutely beat the fuck out of each other on each and every one of those occasions when they would meet. It was always insane. They fought at Savage's Station. I don't believe they fought directly, but I could be wrong about that one. They fought at Ball's Bluff. They fought at Antietam, right? And Fredericksburg was no different. For some reason, the Mississippi Brigade and that brigade in the Union just kept meeting each other, and the 20th kept fighting against these Mississippi regiments. Now, this man, Lane Brandon, right? Henry Abbott's Harvard classmate and foe in battle. Henry Livermore Abbott was his full name. He was in command. He was not in command of the 20th that day, but he was in command of a company of the 20th Massachusetts that day. And he actually met Lane Brandon on the battlefield. Lane Brandon and Henry Abbott were actually pretty good friends from Harvard. They knew each other, and I believe they may have even been roommates. They may have been roommates, if I remember correctly. They ended up meeting that day on the battlefield, and that's why Lane Brandon did not want to leave, because he didn't want to be the one who had to lose to his old Harvard friend. It was literally that. What's going on, Big Uncle Ruckus? You're right on time, my man. You're right on time. It's like I said earlier. I know this is not everybody's cup of tea, but I feel like I want to. I want to do this, so I'm doing it. Even though I have probably like, let's see how many people. Let's see how many people. Oh, there's 5 people. The peak. Oh, 6. The peak concurrent that I've had for this stream has been 6 viewers. 6 viewers concurrent, which is like that's a new low for me. But I know this is not considered to be the most exciting or the most captivating anything. I know it. I get it. I understand. But like I said, I feel like I want to and need to do this to a certain degree. Now, this is actually a letter that was written by Lane Brandon to Henry Abbott's dad. Henry Abbott actually died in, I believe it was 1864. He died in battle. Lane Brandon lived to a ripe old age. He actually lived to see the 1900s, I believe. He might have died in like 1911, 1912, somewhere around there. So he lived he lived a while. But excuse me. We're gonna go ahead. We're gonna read this, right? We're gonna read this now. 11. No, I don't have 11. I don't have 11 whole viewers. Oh, wow. All right, 10 viewers. Wow. Hello, everyone. Hello. How we doing tonight? Anyway, we're gonna read this letter. This was written by someone like I said, Lane Brandon and Henry Abbott. Even though they were Harvard friends, they were they were on separate sides of the conflict, and they fought directly against each other in the Battle of Fredericksburg. And Lane Brandon was still fond enough of Henry Abbott to send a letter to his father. Post-war letter from Lane Brandon to Josiah G. Abbott, father of Henry Abbott and Ned Abbott, officer of the 2nd Massachusetts, killed at Cedar Mountain. Talking about Ned Abbott. Brandon was a Harvard classmate and friend of Henry Abbott and served as an officer in the 21st Mississippi, a regiment which met the 20th Mass in battle many times. Oft-told story about the 20th Massachusetts famous charge through the streets of Fredericksburg on December 11th, 1862 was that Lieutenant Brandon refused to obey orders to withdraw his Confederate troops from the skirmish with the 20th Mass, and he was placed under arrest. The reason being was that Brandon did not want his classmate Abbott to win the skirmish. This letter was obtained from a scrapbook of letters and clippings collected by Caroline Livermore Abbott and is now in the possession of her great-granddaughter Elizabeth Abbott de Mowbray of London, England. Oof. Moved all the way back to fucking England? Forget about it. Why would you even want to, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Anyway, Arcole P1 LA. I would assume that's Louisiana. I could be wrong though. April 20th, 420, 1866. Honorable J.G. Abbott, my dear judge. Your kind letter was received several days ago. Please accept my heartfelt thanks for the photographs of your boys and the obituary notice of Henry. The photograph of Henry is not so good as the one I lost. The one of Ned is the same style as the one of him I received during the war and is lifelike. Numbers of strangers who have seen Ned's photograph have universally remarked the will of iron indicated by the eye and expression of his mouth. I can bear witness to both having been possessed this attribute in the highest degree, though their memories are endeared to me by other and closer ties. Excuse me. The In Memoriam of Major Abbott was a beautiful tribute to the memory of a soldier, a gentleman, and a Christian. It is remarkable that our brigades should have met face to face on so many fields. In fact, Henry's old brigade became so well known to us that several times when the fighting would become warm and stubborn, I have heard the remark, "Boys, these must be the old fellows. They fight mighty like it." My company was stationed all winter 61 until March 62 on picket at Ball's Bluff. Three regiments of my brigade participated in the engagement at this place on the 21st of October, 1861, but my regiment was not assigned to the command until some time subsequent. Excuse me. Um, we renewed our acquaintance on the evening of the 31st of May at Fair Oaks or Seven Pines. A lot of these battles have two names because you literally have what the Union called it and what the Confederates called it. That's why, like, Antietam, like, I don't know about in the South if they still call it Sharpsburg, but the Confederates were calling it the Battle of Sharpsburg. It was Antietam to the Union. Um, uh, we renewed our acquaintance on the evening of the 31st of May at Fair Oaks or Seven Pines. The meeting was a warm one for us. I believe they may have. I forget if they. I. I'm trying to remember who won and who lost, but whatever. I don't even think that matters that much. We next met on the evening of the 30th of June at Glendale. Glendale's a really good one, mentioned in General Lee's report as Fraser's Farm, and again on Tuesday evening, 1st of July at Malvern Hill, then in the streets of Fredericksburg, night of December 11th, 62, and at Marie's Heights on May 3rd, 1863. I see by the papers that Henry has been breveted a brigadier general of volunteers. I sincerely regret that the courage and skill displayed by him on so many bloody and hard fought battlefields could not have been exercised on this broader field of action. Before closing, I will add that none of my immediate family were killed in the war, and that if you can write, charity requires us to suppose there were a great many honest persons on both sides, and duty requires us to do justice to all. How much more ought that sentiment to be binding on me, and I trust I will not prove recusant to it. Please remember me kindly to Mrs. Perry and George, to Mrs. Abbott and family, and accept for yourself the assurance of the esteem and regard. Your friend, Lane W. Brandon. That is that really is a beautiful letter. Um, that's it's I mean, it's just a beautiful letter. I do have to get out of here soon. I have about 20 more minutes until it's until it's that 2 hour mark. And as much like it's like I said, I know this is not oh dude, I have to set up a fucking account. Maybe I'll see if I can set up an account to this real quick. Um let's see if I can do this. I found a book that I can digitally borrow, and it's the it's the actual it's got letters Damn it. All right. Don't you worry. I know what I'll do. It's got letters from Henry Abbott. I want to read to see if there's one from Fredericksburg there. Uh, yes. There we go. Let's go, Brandon. I didn't get tricked by anything, but I wanted to confirm the Fallout New Vegas remake rumors. Obviously, they were fake. Yeah, yeah. I feel like back in October, I heard something about that. I feel like I heard that back in fucking October. Is where I heard that. And yeah, it definitely was that was definitely definitely not true. Definitely not true. Okay. Yes. So 100, yes. So page 142 went from 6 to 7, now up to 11. Yeah. All right. Fredericksburg, Nothing But Murder, which is by Henry Abbott, the man that this letter was written about. We're gonna read this. Oh, hey, that's William Raymond Lee. He was the colonel of the regiment. Yep, here we are. So, dear Papa, Carrie's letter will tell you that I, as well as Holmes, am with the regiment all right. They sent us to Warrenton and then back, but 6 miles below Warrenton Junction, while on the road to Alexandria, we heard of Sumner's corps marching through Warrenton Junction 2 days before. So we gave our valises in charge of Reverend Dr. Snob and Toady Fuller. Interesting, of the 16th Massachusetts. I feel like he was talking shit here. He was definitely talking shit. Of the 16th Massachusetts got out of the cars, marched back to Warrenton Junction, set out about 4:30 on the road to Fredericksburg, and marched a few miles and lost our way. The next day, 20 miles, and the next 4 or 5 caught the regiment and have been lying here 2 days near Falmouth, waiting the capture of Fredericksburg. Our idea is that we are racing with the rebels to get into Richmond first, thus seizing their base, while we change ours to Fort Monroe, with the James for communication, as Wellington did on the peninsula. Rather a hazardous move, particularly as the rebels are probably already in Richmond, and removal of McClellan having delayed the army just long enough to let the rebels get there. The removal of McClellan caused as much row as we thought. The men cried, and so did McClellan. Officers in high positions were only prevented from resigning by a general order from the boss at the War Department, threatening dishonorable dismissal to all officers who gave McClellan's removal as the reason of their resignation. The Dutch emperor who rules over us is worse even than I expected. Something must be done. All the officers have petitioned Revere to come back, but I am afraid he is too sick to think of it for months to come. You see, and that is one thing about the 20th Mass, is that there were so many different people of different persuasions and stuff like that. There was actually a lot of drama. And something that happened later on in the war with the 20th was that one of their officers got murdered. There was just like a straight up unsolved murder of one of their officers. And the theory is that it was over a woman. There was like another guy from another regiment who was like, he posed as somebody in the 20th Massachusetts, and he shot the officer because he was like, oh, like I want, the girl we both love is gonna pick him, so I'll just kill him and then I'll make my way back to Massachusetts. But anyway, um, Colonel Lee, strictly private, is undoubtedly very much shaken in his intellects, at any rate at times. And this is actually in reference to what happened after Antietam, which Colonel Lee was so fucked up by what he saw at Antietam, he had a nervous breakdown. He literally he had a nervous break, and he was really never the same after that. Like he just kind of rode off on his horse, and then like 2 weeks later, people found him just like wandering around with fucking like no clothes on type shit. It was pretty insane, you know. Buster Zuzu says I come from the gay awards. These are the gay awards, bro. Um. Anyway, Macy thinks so. So do Allie and Lieutenant Herbert C. Mason. It seems the horrors of Antietam, his previous fatigues, and his drinking completely upset him. After the battle, he was completely distraught. He didn't give any orders. He wouldn't do anything. The next morning, he mounted his horse. Oh, shit, this is talking about what I'm talking about. And without any leave of absence, without letting anybody know where he was going, he set out alone. Macy, who was bringing up some recruits, met him about 10 miles away from the regiment, without a cent in his pocket, without anything to eat or drink, without having changed his clothes for 4 weeks, during all which time he had this horrible diarrhea, just getting ready to turn into a stable for the night. Wow. Macy gave him a drink and some money and got him into a house, put him to bed stark naked, and got his wits more settled, and then came on. When the poor old man came back to the regiment, they thought he had been on an awful spree. He was so livid and shaky. Macy says he was just like a little child wandering away from home. One of the colonel's crazy things while in command of the brigade is rather ludicrous. Somebody came in and told the colonel that one of Gorman's aides accused this brigade of running shamefully at Antietam. The colonel was raving. He exclaimed Gorman was responsible for his aides. He shall take back the calumny or fight me. Damn, that's yo, Gorman, tell your aides quit talking shit or we're gonna fight. Um, well, poor old Ropes, who was an aide of the colonel's, was in an awful stew. The colonel wouldn't listen to any remonstrances, jeez, but called for his horse, buckled his sword to speed to Gorman's. Gorman, of course, denied the whole thing, saying in his own street way, sooner may in his own sweet way. I thought it said street way. Sooner may the Lord tear my right arm from its socket and beat me about the head with the bloody stump, than allow me or my staff to say aught to tarnish the glory of the noble Third Brigade. So the thing ended. Excuse me. So this is William Raymond Lee, like I said, and he actually was cool with Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee sent him letters during the war. Like they weren't related or anything like that, but they knew each other, they were friends, and they would actually like talk to each other throughout the war. At least at one point in the war. Captain Ferdinand Dreher, who survived a ghastly head wound suffered at Ball's Bluff, only to be mortally wounded at the Battle of Fredericksburg. Yep, this dude's very German, very German. There was a lot of Irish and German guys in there. Um, my family is related to one of the famous family names from the war. Wish I paid more attention to the Civil War in school. Yeah, it's crazy when you go through school and you're like, oh, like, all right, I guess this is cool, or maybe you're just absolutely not interested at all. You could give a fuck, right? Either one, and then you figure out, oh shit, actually, like I was learning about my family history there. Damn, that's insane, huh? Anyway, um, why, there is no doubt about it, Papa. His wits are unsettled and will be as long as he stays in the army. He ought to be made to resign. He, I'm sorry to say, and Dreher are the laughing stocks of the division. Paul Revere or Frank Bartlett must come out, and that soon. We must have somebody to set things straight, fill up vacancies, and depose these insolent, ignorant, vulgar fellows who are insulting the officers and demoralizing the regiment. By the way, Colonel Lee actually did send a list of nominations containing my name for Billy Milton, sealed and mailed it. The army is about the same, except that the desire to go into the winter quarters grows stronger every day among officers and men. Of the two alternatives, defeat or winter quarters, I think they prefer the latter, though now I am out here, I can't form an opinion um, which is to be. I am well, strong, and healthy, and eat hearty, but don't drink ditto because there is no longer rum. The tea and coffee are excellent, much better than the weak stuff you have at home. I drink a pint of either at each meal and think of the nervous headache it would give you. Um, you needn't write until you have plenty of spare time. Ask Mama if she got my two last. Um, so we have a December 1st. I wanna see about any okay. So there's a December 1st and there's a December 14th. Huh. There's a December 14th and a December 13th. Interesting. Okay, well, we'll read them in the order that they're presented. So this is the day after Marie's Heights. My dear Papa, we are still in Fredericksburg. The very moment I finished my last letter to Mama, we were ordered again to the front. Okay. So he wrote this. He wrote he wrote the you know what? I feel like I'm gonna have to read this one. And then I'm gonna have to read that one. And then maybe I'll read the one on the 17th. This is Leander Alley. Damn. Anyway, um dear Madam, Mrs. Mitchell, Private Josiah F. Murphy, who brings the dead body of your son, will tell you fully all the particulars. I know by judging of my own feelings how bitterly you will feel his loss. I can say from an intimate acquaintance with him that he was as brave, resolute, and energetic, and at the same time as tender hearted a man as I ever knew. When I first heard of his death, I didn't see him fall. I felt the kind of pang as when I first heard of my brother's death, who was killed at Cedar Mountain. It was only a few nights before his death that he was telling me about his family and speaking of you in terms of the strongest affection. Every man in the regiment, from the colonel to the men of other companies, respected and admired him as much as any officer that has ever belonged to the regiment. He was a most invaluable officer. A great deal of the superiority of Company I is due to Lieutenant Alley. I shall never cease to think of him with love to my dying day. I hope after this bloody war is over, I shall live to express to you personally what I have been writing in this letter. I remain, my dear madam, yours very respectfully, um, H.L. Abbott. He was the captain of Company I, you know, which means he was the leader of the company. So, this is written a day later, okay? My dear Papa, we are still in Fredericksburg. The very moment I finished my last letter to Mama, we were ordered again to the front. Howard, a most conscientious man, but a very poor general, had heard of batteries stormed and rifle pits taken, and without stopping to think, he took the weakest brigade in the army, one which, besides, was considerably demoralized by the fight of the previous day and the shelling they had suffered, to say nothing of the recollection of their awful loss and defeat at Antietam. He took this brigade and ordered it to advance, not all together, but by regiment after regiment. Uh, the result the result was that the 19th Massachusetts, which first got into position, no sooner reached the brow of the hill than they tumbled right back, head over heels, into us. So he's actually talking about what happens on the 13th, but we'll keep reading this. Then came our turn. We had about 200 men. We advanced 2 or 3 rods over the brow of the hill under a murderous fire, without the slightest notion of what was intended to be accomplished. Our men, however, though they couldn't be got to advance in double quick against the rifle pits, which we soon perceived, didn't on the other hand, like the 19th, break and run. They held their position firmly until Colonel Hall, seeing that the pits could only be carried at the run, and that if carried, they were completely enfiladed by a rebel battery on the hill, ordered us to retire, which we did in good order. Um, Below the brow of the hill, where the whole brigade lay until 2 next morning, crowds of troops were ordered up, but none found courage even to undertake what the poor little brigade of 1,000 men had been unable to accomplish. At 2 o'clock, we were relieved by the regulars, who were ordered up as a last resort, since Hall's brigade had failed to take the pits, which they were to storm this morning. However, the generals have changed their minds since and consider the assault impractical, so nothing has been done today except a little shelling around 3 o'clock. Hall stoutly condemned the whole attempt, by such a weak, exhausted brigade, as simply ridiculous, but Howard is so pious that he thought differently. Um, Hold on one sec. I want to see real quick if there's anything. Jeez, that's fucking Burnside. Oh, I want to see if there's anything regarding the the street fighting. You know. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he does. I don't know if he does talk about it a ton. You know. I mean, maybe he does. I'm not 100% sure. You know, I mean, he's still near Falmouth. It's January 3rd, you know? Hmm. Anyway, so I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive on the Battle of Fredericksburg, right? We didn't get to every little thing that we could have gotten to. Like, for instance, I'm thinking maybe next time I'll go ahead and I'll read this. This was actually a story of how some Mississippi regiment guys, some guys in the Mississippi regiment, they saved a baby. They saved a baby girl, right? Who was in the middle of Fredericksburg when there was when shit was hitting the fan. Maybe we'll read that next time, tomorrow or Saturday or whenever I stream next. Um, I really wanted to do this because it's important to me, and I think it's an important piece of American history, specifically that first day of the battle, where when you think of Fredericksburg, you tend to think of the charge on Marie's Heights, and the Irish Brigade and all that other stuff. You don't think about something that was equally, and if not more, crazy than even the assault on Marie's Heights, which was the clearing of Fredericksburg. Both sides of that battle were absolutely positively, it was gallant. Gallant is a great word, right? There was gallantry on both sides of that. Whether you were holding off the army so that the rest of the Confederates were able to get into the place, or if you were somebody who was crossing the river so that you could clear the town in the 7th, the 19th, the 7th Michigan, the 19th, and the 20th Massachusetts. Regardless of that, there was a lot of bravery and there was a lot of firsts. There was a lot of daring on both sides, and I think that deserves to be remembered in a way that is a little bit more than just pop history. You know, pop history would be, oh, Fredericksburg, you mean Marie's Heights? Haha. Not that Marie's Heights is not worth remembering. You know, it definitely is. But again, it's pop history. You know, when it comes to like the Civil War, I guess you could say it kind of is. Um, this is something that I feel a deep connection with because of my familial ties to it, my ancestral ties to it, and also just knowing that my ancestor was a part of something so great in this battle. It means something to me, and that's why, like I said, I went and I visited there. I could have visited a few different places if I wanted to, you know, like Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania. It's all kind of, you know, it's all kind of like really historic when it comes to the Civil War because that's where the majority of the Eastern Theater took place, you know. Um, but I went to Fredericksburg. You know, I got water from the Rappahannock. It's even got some particles in it. It's even got some particles in it. Oh boy, some sediment. Um, I just wanted to share that with you. Like I said, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. I know not everybody loves the hell out of it. I get it, you know. I didn't expect tons of people to show up to this and be like, "Oh shit, let's totally like pay close attention and be a captive audience and all that stuff." I just want to say thank you to the people who showed up. Thank you to the people who stuck around, whether you were here from the beginning or not. Just, you know, thank you for being here. All right, I appreciate you. Um, I'm gonna head out. All right. And like I said, I'll probably be streaming tomorrow, but if not, I will definitely be streaming Saturday. We're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it all out. Ooh, excuse me. Anyway, one last time, thank you for showing up. And until next time, good luck out there.